on November the 12th. Throughout the shutdown, we've held 4 telephone town halls, just like the one we're having tonight, which would be the 5th, as well as 3 in-person forums in West Hartford, Glastonbury, and East Hartford. We find, of course, that we can reach more people on a telephone town hall, and that's why we do this, especially as we approach the holidays and during the shutdown. And now my office is here to help, and that's the importance of the conference this evening. If you have any trouble at all with any federal agency or any issues, you can reach us at any time at 860-278-8888. And as Charles mentioned at the outset, if we don't get to all the questions tonight, please send them to us, and I assure you that all your questions will be answered. That's our job. That's our responsibility. For 43 days, I heard directly from many of you online about the impact of this shutdown and the ongoing, what I think is best described as cost of living crisis for the country. With government reopened, here's where things stand. On November the 8th, after some delay, full SNAP nutrition benefits were issued to Connecticut residents. If you're still having a problem or an issue, please, again, call our office, 860-278-8888. As many of you know, SNAP benefits are required to be issued during a government shutdown under federal law, and Congress authorized an additional $6 billion contingency fund to keep food assistance flowing. But President Trump refused to send out funding for SNAP. He took that fight all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to run out the clock. Thankfully, we have a great Attorney General in William Tong who fought him every step of the way on behalf of Connecticut families. And Governor Lamont did the right thing, courageously stepping up to authorize state funds for SNAP. With the shutdown over, I hope we can put this shameful chapter in the past. No one should go hungry. So Donald Trump, who's never had to worry where his next meal is coming from, can make a political point. Federal workers who went without pay during the shutdown, including our air traffic controllers, Capitol Police officers, doctors and nurses at the VA, have received their full back pay, and rightfully so. Checks started to go out on November the 15th, and the House employees received full pay on November 17th. It is wrong that members of Congress and the President and political appointees could continue to get paid during the shutdown while troops and civil servants would not get their paychecks. I deferred my paycheck as a member of Congress and introduced the MAGA Act, Make America Govern Again, so politicians do not get paid while politicians get paid and workers don't. Never again should people who keep the country running day in and day out go without pay while politicians who make these decisions collect a check. If you are on Medicare and had a telehealth appointment canceled or rescheduled during the shutdown, visits can now resume. When the shutdown ended, full coverage for telehealth under Medicare was reinstated. My office has prepared a web page for answers to these common questions and more as government reopens. You can find those resources at larson.house.gov. And as always, call our office at 860-278-8888 if you have any questions, and especially if you're still having trouble accessing your benefits. Now, The funding bill doesn't address health care. I'm glad that the essential services Connecticut families rely on are continuing, but the bill the Republicans passed to reopen government shamefully did nothing to address skyrocketing health care costs. If anything, their inaction is only making the problem worse. I'm frustrated by that, and I know many of you are as well. If Affordable Care Act tax credits are not extended, 112,000 Connecticutans will see their cost rise. Some will even see their premium double. The average family in our district will see their costs rise by $2,571. As I've heard a constituent from Middletown say to me, that's more than I pay for my monthly mortgage. That is not only unacceptable, it's immoral. Donald Trump and the Republicans watch. 15 million Americans are about to lose their health care entirely. Millions more will see their costs skyrocket, just like so many of you who I heard from during this shutdown. They didn't have my vote when they created this healthcare crisis, and they don't have it now. Inaction is not an option, and I'm not, nor are the Democrats in Congress, giving up. The entire Connecticut delegation is standing together with our Democratic colleagues to take action on health care. And we're led by our own Rosa DeLauro from New Haven. Democrats put forward a plan more than 2 months ago that would have prevented this shutdown, reversed the Trump health care cuts, and stopped these double-digit premium hikes. While Republican leadership refuses to call a vote, a majority of the members of the Congress, and I do believe are committed to acting, are there. Our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, filed a discharge petition that can bypass the Speaker and force the House to vote on our bill to extend health care credits. This petition is the same process we took finally to get a vote on releasing the Epstein files after months of obstruction by Speaker Johnson, President Trump, and their allies. I hope that the effort has brought us one step closer to the truth and justice for Mr. Epstein's victims. Just like we were able to act on the files, we need to act on health care. It's time for Congress to do its job. I hope, because I know some of my Republican colleagues will finally stand up for their constituents and join us. We've even seen that, if you can believe it, from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, SNAP funding continues to be a concern. While funding for existing SNAP benefits have continued, as I mentioned before, the Republican funding bill did end up passing, also failed to address Trump's disastrous cuts to food assistance. That's what we're in this fight for. We cannot forget that the big, beautiful bill eviscerates our nation's #1 nutrition program as we know it. 42 million Americans rely on SNAP, including veterans, the elderly, the disabled, and children. 360,000 residents in Connecticut alone receive SNAP benefits, including 120,000 children. That same Republican budget means that at least 34,000 Connecticutans will be kicked off SNAP entirely. For what purpose? so that billionaires can get a tax cut? The other week I visited Hands on Hartford, a food pantry that saw their community's needs increase exponentially during the shutdown. They went from serving about 90 people a day to having over 500 residents come through their doors in just a 2-day period. It was inspiring to see the volunteers and community members come together to help each other out, but they need action from their government. It's shameful that Trump let it get to this point. In Connecticut, we didn't play politics with people's lives like that, thanks to the leadership of Governor Ned Lamont. In Congress, our entire delegation will continue to stand up for food assistance, knowing that SNAP benefits were supposed to go out under law. It was shameful to watch our Supreme Court bow to the whims of the president yet again, this time allowing him to keep food off the tables of our children, the elderly, the disabled, and our veterans. I want to praise our colleague Johanna Hayes, who introduced a bill to reverse the Republican SNAP cuts and put new protections in place to make sure this can never happen again. To add insult to injury, while we have been fighting to protect health care and SNAP, the fight in the Senate that ended this shutdown ended up being over how to pad their own pockets. I know, you've probably heard it, but it's still hard to believe that Republicans snuck in a provision that would entitle 8 Republican senators to receive $1 million plus in taxpayer-funded payouts for having their phone records lawfully, and I underscore lawfully, examined as part of the January 6th investigations. It is the most corrupt provision I have ever voted on during my public life. As you might imagine, I voted against it once last week, and I joined my colleagues in the House to vote to repeal it. That repeal in the House passed unanimously, 426 to nothing. It's rare to see such overwhelming agreement on issues these days, but we should all be able to agree that Americans should not be footing a bill for corruption. And let's be honest, the vote left us with a little chance of repeal of it actually becoming law. When Democrats tried to pass it through the Senate, Lindsey Graham stood up and objected, threatening a filibuster, and even said he wanted to collect tens of millions of dollars. Those were his words, not mine. Senator Graham apparently feels that his privacy was violated by a lawful subpoena. But what about Elon Musk's Doge and what they did to 300 million Americans' records from Social Security, moving names, addresses, and birth dates to a vulnerable cloud? That, to me, and you'll hear me say more about this on the floor when we get back to Congress, to be able to look at and pursue with people who have been unvetted, never held accountable, 24-year-olds combing over your personal records and then taking them out of the secure Social Security and placing them what can only be interpreted as a vulnerable cloud. That has to be the largest data breach in our nation's history. But we heard nothing from them. Where's the outrage for that? It's shameful for Senate Majority Leader John Thune to side with those senators on this, even after a unanimous vote in the House of Representatives. He needs to stand up to his colleagues, schedule a vote to repeal this corrupt payout scheme once and for all. The American people deserve transparency and honest work from their government, not senators voting to gift themselves millions of your tax dollars. I'm proud of Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal for them standing up and making sure that they are, as they always are, on the right side of the people and protecting and respecting them. But they're in the minority in the Senate, as we are in the House. And now, in the spirit of everything that's been going on, and it being Thanksgiving, and I wish I was more positive in what I had to say, but we have to be there to protect you during these times. So I want to hear from you directly and hopefully answer your questions to the best of my ability. And any that I can, please call our office again at 860-278-8888, and we will get an answer to every one of your questions. Let's open the phones.
Thank you so much, Congressman. As a reminder to everyone on the line, and we do have about 3,700 folks joining right now, if you do have a question, you can press *3 now. To sign up for Congressman Larson's newsletter and receive updates and information about future events, press *6 on your keypad. We will begin with our first question that's been submitted online. Our first question comes from Annette in Manchester, who asks, what can be done about the Trump administration's deployments of the National Guard in our cities?
Well, thank you, Annette, for that question. It's both timely and speaks directly to, I think, what is becoming more transparent to the American people. Donald Trump is trying to use the National Guard as if it's his own personal army. He's acting like an authoritarian would. That's why he recalled generals from around the world to Virginia, where he told them to look at American cities as training grounds to fight the enemy from within. Now, I want you to think about that. To fight the enemy from within. Who is the enemy from within? The enemy from within is anyone who disagrees with him. That is not what the Constitution says. We should all think long and hard about this. He deployed troops to Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. In both those cases, courts ruled after the fact he had no authority to put them in our streets. He tried to send National Guard troops to Chicago and Portland, but recently he was stopped by the courts before he could do it. The Trump administration is appealing to the Supreme Court, and I'm proud, again, of our Attorney General, William Tong. Well, I hope all of you listening on this thank him, because he filed a brief saying this president has no authority to turn our military against the American people. Since when are the American people the enemy from within? I'm hearing from constituents every day who see this power grab for what it is. This isn't about safety. It's about instilling fear and Trump trying to amass as much power till he achieves in his mind total power. That's not what America is all about. That's not who we are. That's not what this nation is. And I dare say that's what our armed forces, that's not what our armed forces are about either. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Congressman. As a reminder to everyone on the line, if you have a question, you can press *3 now to be placed into the queue. Our next question comes from Grace, who's joining us from Newington, and she had a question about ICE in our communities. Grace, you are now live with the Congressman.
Hello.
Grace.
So my question is about the current ICE raids that have been happening all over our state. I want to know what we can do as friends and neighbors of people that are being targeted by ICE and what your plan is for helping people that are truly victims of ICE at this time.
Well, first of all, Grace, let me thank you for the question. And secondly, well, you live in Newington, so you experienced it firsthand. Donald Trump, as you know, and I'm sure a number of the listeners do, is sending masked ICE agents. And you've seen the pictures with the black masks and with the armaments into our communities to create a sense of fear, not improve the safety. Look, let me be upfront. If a person is here illegally and they're a criminal or a crime victim, they don't belong here. But that's not the case for the vast majority of people that he is targeted and that ICE is targeted. We all watched in horror when mothers were snatched from their children by armed men in black masks in Newington this summer. Or when a visa holder was taken in an unmarked van from his green card appointment in my hometown of East Hartford. A man who actually helped our armed forces out in Afghanistan. And then we had to bring him here to save his life. That's not the America I know, or you know, or the America we love. I'm proud to champion the No Secret Police Act in Congress to require federal law enforcement to identify themselves and bar them from wearing masks. Do you see our local police officers or state police wearing masks? Of course not. I'm also supporting what we call the Protecting Sensitive Locations Act to prohibit ICE raids in schools, hospitals, courthouses, and churches. The mayor of Newington said it best to me. He said, "My wife is an immigrant. I'm the mayor of Newington, and she's afraid to go out." How can that possibly be the country that we live in? We are a nation of immigrants. It's immigrants who have made this country what it is. And I won't stop speaking out against this grotesque abuse of power even if it puts me on Donald Trump's Homeland Security watch list. I'm proud to be there with Hakeem Jeffries and Jasmine Crockett and several other members of Congress. Why? Because we spoke out forcefully when Trump sent his masked agents into our communities. Because we stand up for our constituents as well as, and most importantly, the Constitution of the United States. You can count on my always standing up for what's right. And I'll always stand up for you and the people I'm sworn to serve. Count on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Lee, who joins us from Manchester, and he has a question about the Jeffrey Epstein files. And Lee, you are now live with the Congressman.
Good evening, Congressman, and everybody on the call. My question is, given the inconsistencies this administration has put forth with respect to Epstein files, a la first they're on a desk, then they don't exist, then they're a hoax, now there's something, do you believe we're actually going to get some form of truth out of these things when they are released, or are they going to be completely redacted to save people's hides?
Yeah, well, Lee, first and foremost, thank you for your question, and certainly I can appreciate your skepticism with regard to it, but transparency and accountability are the hallmarks of a democratic government. President Trump, as you'll recall, campaigned on the promise of releasing the Epstein files. Then when the rubber met the road, he did everything in his power, including having the Speaker of the House refuse to swear in a duly elected member of Congress in order to prevent their release. You may recall, I heard directly from 10 brave survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse network. Their stories are harrowing and compelling. President Trump may call these files a hoax, but these survivors deserve justice and accountability. Their stories are real. They are no hoax. Thankfully, Representative Grijalva was sworn in on November the 12th and became the final signature needed for the petition to force a vote on the Epstein files. Last week, I probably voted yes, along with nearly every one of my colleagues, to finally release the files. We still don't know what the White House and Trump allies are trying to hide in these files. But as I like to quote oftenly, we should go back to the great historian Robert Graves, who wrote in I, Claudius, when it came to everything that was going on in the Roman Empire at the time, and asked whether it should come forward. The response was, let all the poison that lurks in the mud hatch out. And that includes Republicans and Democrats. They have less than 30 days to release the files. We'll be watching. And I stand with, and I know you do as well, with our survivors of sexual abuse and our democratic principles of equal protection under the law.
Thank you, Congressman. As a reminder to folks who are on the line with us tonight, if you have a question, you can press *3 now to be entered into the queue. If you would like to sign up for Congressman Larson's newsletter to receive updates and information about future events, press star 6 on your keypad. Our next question comes from Merdad from Glastonbury, who submitted a question online, and he asked, how do Democrats intend to stand up for the Affordable Care Act and extend or sustain it?
Well, Merdad, thank you for your question. I think one of the things that the delegation, and I add myself obviously to that, is one of our proudest accomplishments in Congress has been passing the Affordable Care Act. Standing arm in arm with my dear late friend John Lewis and Speaker Pelosi to get it to President Obama's desk when I was chair of the Democratic caucus. Today, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, 50 million Americans have gained coverage, bringing our nation's uninsured rate to a record low. More still needs to be done. But even with that, it's under attack. Donald Trump and the Republicans have tried to repeal it more than 50 times. Their big, beautiful bill, as you note, kicks 15 million Americans off their health care plan and saddles family with skyrocketing premiums by failing to extend health care tax credits. Like I said earlier in my opening comments, the average family in our district will be paying $2,571 more. That's not only unacceptable, that's immoral, because the reasoning behind this is so that Trump can provide billionaires with a tax break. It's beyond shameful. And it should turn everyone's stomach. I can't believe that even billionaires can look themselves in the mirror and be happy for getting more money that they don't need from people whose very survival and very need for health care is at stake. We will not give up the fight. We have a discharge petition to force a vote on our plan to extend these credits, and we are going to fight to get this done. Just like we forced a vote on releasing the Epstein files, we can force a vote to protect you from these rate increases and stop this latest assault on the Affordable Care Act.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Winston, who's joining us from Bloomfield, and he has a question about what's going on in Venezuela. Winston, you are now live with the Congressman.
Good evening, Congressman Larson, and thank you for taking the time to have this phone town hall. As you've indicated, the Trump administration is becoming increasingly authoritative, trying to get as much power as possible. And I'm concerned about the continued provocation that this administration seems to be having to get us into some type of war with Venezuela, who hasn't even attacked us. And now he's signed off on a plan by the CIA to launch some type of potential action within the country itself. So what is his end game? What is he trying to seek, and how can we stop this?
Well, Winston, first and foremost, thank you. I mean, there is such intensity, as we said at the outset, of everything that's going on. And mind you, this president is a master at distraction and deceit, and is able to misdirect focus. And you ask a very salient and important question of the abuse of his use of executive authority. President Trump is striking boats off the coast of Venezuela and positioning military assets in the region, even pulling a carrier strike group from the Middle East. The Trump administration says they are going after cartels, but they have not presented any evidence. And the point here is evidence to us about their mission before they started blowing up ships in the Caribbean Sea. This is not a new issue for me. After months of briefings and faulty intelligence from the Bush administration, I voted against the Iraq War. I later traveled to Iraq 3 times, meeting with our military leaders and troops. And each visit reinforced my decision to oppose the war. The last thing we need is to be dragged into yet another foreign conflict. That's why I voted to repeal the Iraq War authorization earlier this year and am co-sponsoring resolutions to require President Trump to come before Congress before he can wage any war in Iran or Venezuela. That is the responsibility of the Congress. Congress and Congress alone has the power to declare war. Donald Trump views the Constitution as a suggestion that he may or may not consider. He'd rather rule by edict than govern with the consent of the people. We cannot sit back and allow him to unilaterally bring us dangerously close to war. Our resolutions would require him to cease these operations in the Caribbean and withdraw forces from Venezuela unless Congress authorizes military force. And to do that, there should be full hearings, and the administration should explain why and what's at stake. I urge my Republican colleagues who control the House and Senate to join us in this effort to reclaim the war powers of the United States Congress and to make sure we do not blindly send our service members into another unending conflict because Donald Trump has asked.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Michael, who joins us from West Hartford, and he asks, what is being done to address the high cost of living right now?
Thank you. Well, Michael, thank you. I think everywhere I go, Mike, that's the thing that's on everybody's minds. All of these questions are important, but people, when you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, when you're sitting across the table and don't know whether you can pay the heating bill, when you wonder if your lights are still going to be on, we are in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Families are being squeezed by higher costs at the grocery store, the pharmacy, and everywhere you shop. According to the Yale Budget Lab, Trump's tariffs, and that's at the heart of this, mean the average household will pay an additional $1,800 more this year. Tariffs are a tax on you. And the president has no authority to impose taxes on the American people without the consent of the Congress. And that's why our Republican colleagues have got to stand up. We're called co-equal branches of government for a reason. We're in a system of checks and balances where there is no check and no balance. We are hopeful the Supreme Court will step in to overturn his tariffs, but we don't need to wait for their decision. I have a bill with my colleagues Linda Sanchez from California to suspend the president's tariffs and require Congress to vote before any new tariffs can go into effect. That's how it should be. That's what the Constitution requires. Seniors on fixed incomes aren't seeing any relief either. With only a 2.8% COLA for Social Security set to kick in next year, that's why Democrats are fighting so hard, not just to protect Social Security, but to expand it so no one can retire into poverty after a lifetime of work. I'm proud to lead that fight. In the wealthiest country in the world, no one should have to choose between paying rent, putting gas in their car, or putting dinner on the table. The support of our next speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, Democrats will take action on Social Security in the first 100 days that we control the House and hold Donald Trump and the Republicans' feet to the fire, whether it's health care, tariffs, or Social Security. Democrats have real plans to lower the cost for families and seniors. What we need is a co-equal branch of government willing to vote the will of the people.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Bertrand, who joins us from Windsor. And his question is, how is Medicare going to be affected during the Trump administration?
Well, thank you, Bertrand. As you may know, Trump's big, beautiful bill sets into motion the largest ever cut to Medicare, more than $500 billion over the next decade. That comes after he said he would never cut Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. To be clear, no one is going to be kicked off their Medicare coverage because of these cuts, but it's going to squeeze our doctors and our hospitals. I know. I meet with them and hear from them frequently. With lower reimbursement rates, you'll see less providers take Medicare, giving patients fewer options for care. The Trump administration is also trying to limit prescription drug savings for Medicare beneficiaries. In 2022, we finally passed direct price negotiation. What does that mean? What that means is that we've empowered Medicare to directly negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies on behalf of the entire country, which will allow them to lower the cost and lower the prices. The big, beautiful bill includes new loopholes that could allow Big Pharma to exempt certain drugs from negotiations. I've introduced legislation to repeal that and expand price negotiation to all Americans, led by our good friend just up the river in Springfield, and they will be the incoming chair of Ways and Means, Richard Neal. We're fighting to prevent these cuts from ever going into effect and not only preserve, but expand the landmark drug price negotiation program we passed during the Biden administration. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Congressman. And as we come to the close of our hour, we've come to our final question tonight. And Brett from Bloomfield, who asks, what can be done to protect our democracy, especially given the news today about the new FBI inquiries by the Trump administration into Democratic lawmakers? And as a reminder to everyone before we close, if you were not able to get to your question this evening, you can leave a voicemail after the event by calling 860-278-8888. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the Congressman to answer the final question tonight.
Well, again, and I don't know whether we were cut off, but Brett, I don't know if you saw his speech, but Senator Chris Murphy said it best on the Senate floor. This authoritarian takeover that a lot of people, a lot of editorial boards, a lot of pundits have been talking about isn't coming. It's here. I know it's easy to feel discouraged right now. This president is trying to go after his political opponents, send our troops into our cities, and break down our system of checks and balances. But being here tonight and having your questions answered, engaging with your neighbors is what will keep our democracy alive and well. Because at the end of the day, it's still we, the people. And the interest of you, so many of you, being on the call tonight is heartening. Because it provides you with the inspiration to go back and fight for what you know is right. Forget for the moment Democrat, Republican, or unaffiliated, and focus again on what's right. Look at the results from this month's elections. Voters across the country spoke out in local races in clear voices, and that's in a reaction to what they see has been going on in Washington and seeing what's happening in the White House. The president tried to install his personal attorney as prosecutor to go after former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Got thrown out of court. Last week, it was beyond shameful to see President Trump go after Democratic members of Congress, all of whom have served in our military and intelligence communities with honor, including my friend Maggie Goodlander from New Hampshire and Captain Mark Kelly, a senator from Arizona. He went after them for speaking up for our service members and their duty to the Constitution. They take an oath of office to the Constitution, not to the President of the United States. When you saw that and heard it, I'm sure your reaction was like mine, that this is about as un-American as it gets. But still, with that, he did not back down. And just today, you may have seen that the FBI's Counterterrorism Division is launching an inquiry into members of Congress because they exercise their First Amendment rights. Let's be clear. first and foremost, under the Constitution, the Congress, aka the House and Senate, is a co-equal branch of government. It's a system of checks and balances. And if the United States Congress, speaking its will and educating members of the military by people who have served in the military and the intelligence office, is considered seditious and terroristic by President Trump and his henchmen, then we are entering a new level of authoritarianism. As Americans, we all have the responsibility to speak up. We won't be intimidated. This is why no King's rallies are important. We are not a nation that responds to kings or a man. We respond to a constitution that starts off, "We the people." I stand with my colleagues and will continue to use every tool at our disposal, whether voice legislation or fights, to stand up for our democracy and protect it. I will be on the floor on Monday defending Social Security and their unwillingness to bring Elon Musk before the Congress, to bring Elon Musk to answer before the Committee on Ways and Means, to explain why they're combing over people's personal data and records and have now confiscated it and put it in an insecure cloud. These are things worth fighting for. These are things that the American people need to know. Why are they after your data and personal information? And why, shamefully, have the courts let it happen? Thank God for the William Tongs of this world and attorney generals across the country who are fighting and pushing back, as will we. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Congressman. To everyone on the line, we are coming to the end of our live event this evening. We want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this important conversation with Congressman John Larson. If we were not able to get to your question, you can leave a voicemail after the event by calling 860-278-8888. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and we wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.